Hello and welcome to my channel. I hope you enjoy this story. I'm going to try and upload a new story each day. The Mirror's Twin. Holly Arnold stood alone in her childhood home on the Isle of Wight, her heart heavy with the weight of grief. The house, perched on the island's windswept cliffs, had always felt isolated, but now, in the wake of her twin sister Emily's sudden death, seemed unbearably empty. The distant roar of the sea and the eerie wail of the wind only amplified the silence within. The funeral had been a small, somber affair, attended by a few family members and friends who still lived on the island. Everyone had been polite, offering their condolences, but none could truly understand the depth of Holly's loss. Emily had been more than just a sister. She had been a part of her, a mirror to her soul. They had shared everything: dreams, secrets, fears. And now Emily was gone, leaving Holly with a void that seemed impossible to fill. After the service, Holly had retreated to the old family home, needing to be somewhere that still felt connected to Emily. The house, with its creaking floors and peeling wallpaper, had seen better days, but it was filled with memories of their childhood. Holly wandered through the rooms, touching the faded furniture, trying to recapture the presence of her sister. It was in Emily's room that Holly found the mirror. The room had remained untouched since Emily had moved out a few years ago after their parents' death. A thick layer of dust covered the surfaces, and the air was heavy with the scent of old books and forgotten memories. The mirror stood in the corner, partially covered by a white sheet. Holly frowned, wondering why she hadn't noticed it before. It was an antique, with an ornate gold frame, its surface slightly tarnished with age. Holly pulled the sheet away, revealing the full length of the mirror. The glass was dark, almost as if it absorbed the light rather than reflecting it. She caught her own reflection in it and shivered. The room behind her was dimly lit by the fading daylight, casting long shadows that seemed to twist and shift in the reflection. Her face looked pale, her eyes hollow with grief. She almost didn't recognize herself. As she stared at her reflection, she felt a strange pull, as if the mirror was drawing her in. It was an unsettling sensation, but she couldn't look away. It was then that she noticed something odd. Her reflection, something about it was off. She tilted her head slightly to the left, and the reflection mirrored her movement, but there was a delay, almost imperceptible, but enough to unsettle her. Holly blinked, her breath catching in her throat. Her reflection's eyes were darker, almost black, and there was a faint, twisted smile playing on its lips, a smile she knew she hadn't made. She stepped back, her heart pounding, but the reflection didn't move. It stayed there, staring at her, that eerie smile widening. She stumbled out of the room, slamming the door behind her, trying to shake the image from her mind. But it lingered, the memory of that distorted smile haunting her every thought. For the next few days, Holly avoided Emily's room, leaving the mirror shrouded in the darkness. She tried to convince herself that it had been her imagination, a trick of the light, a product of her grief-stricken mind. But deep down, she knew something was wrong. The house itself seemed to change after that day. The air felt thicker, more oppressive, and the once familiar rooms began to feel alien and hostile. Then the dreams began. Each night Holly would find herself standing in front of the mirror, her reflection staring back at her with those dark, empty eyes. The reflection would smile, that same twisted grin, and then it would step out of the mirror, leaving Holly trapped on the other side. She would wake up in a cold sweat, her heart racing, but the terror wouldn't fade with the morning light. The dreams were so vivid, so real, that Holly began to dread falling asleep. One evening, after another sleepless night, Holly sat in the living room, clutching a cup of tea. The wind howled outside, rattling the windows, and the shadows in the corners of the room seemed to shift and move. She felt exhausted, her nerves frayed, but she couldn't bring herself to go to bed. The thought of facing that mirror in her dreams was too much to bear. As she sat there, she heard a soft creaking sound, like a door slowly opening. She froze, her heart pounding in her chest. The sound came again, closer this time, followed by the faintest whisper of a footstep. Holly set down her cup, her hands trembling. She was alone in the house, at least she was supposed to be. The footsteps grew louder, echoing through the empty hallway. Holly's breath caught in her throat as she realized they were coming from Emily's room. Slowly, she stood up, her body shaking with fear. She wanted to run, to flee the house and never look back, but something compelled her to move toward the sound. As she approached Emily's room, the door creaked open, revealing the darkened interior. The mirror stood in the corner, but something was different. The glass was no longer dark and dull, it shimmered with an unnatural light, casting eerie reflections around the room. Holly hesitated, her hand hovering over the doorknob. A cold sweat broke out across her forehead as she peered into the room. Her reflection stood in front of the mirror, but it wasn't her. The figure was identical in appearance, yet its eyes were those same empty black pits she had seen in her dreams, and that twisted smile was etched across its face. It beckoned her forward with a slow, deliberate motion. Holly wanted to scream, to run, but she found herself stepping into the room, her body moving against her will. The door slammed shut behind her, trapping her inside. The reflection reached out, its hand pressing against the surface of the mirror. Holly felt a cold, invisible force gripping her, pulling her toward the glass. She tried to resist, but it was like fighting against a powerful tide. Her feet slid across the floor as she was drawn closer to the mirror. Her reflection's smile widened, revealing sharp, jagged teeth. Holly's breath came in short, panicked gasps as she fought to break free, but the force was too strong. The moment her hand touched the glass, it was like plunging into ice water. The coldness seeped into her bones, numbing her to the core. Her reflection's hand met hers, and for a brief moment they were connected. Then, with a sudden, violent jerk, the reflection pulled Holly into the mirror. She was plunged into darkness, the cold consuming her. Holly's scream echoed in the void, but no sound escaped her lips. She could see nothing, feel nothing, except for the overwhelming cold and the sensation of falling endlessly into the abyss. When Holly opened her eyes, she was back in her childhood home, but everything was different. The house was dark, the air thick with a suffocating sense of dread. She looked around, disoriented, and then she saw herself. The other Holly stood in the center of the room, her back to the mirror. She was dressed in Holly's clothes, her hair styled the same way, but there was something profoundly wrong about her. Her skin was pale, almost translucent, and her eyes, those black, soulless eyes, seemed to devour the light around her. The other Holly smiled, that twisted, malevolent grin that had haunted Holly's dreams. "Welcome home, sister," she said. Holly tried to speak, to demand what was happening, but her voice was gone. She was trapped, a silent observer in this twisted version of her life. The other Holly moved through the house with a fluid grace, her every motion controlled and deliberate. She was a predator, stalking through the shadows, and Holly was powerless to stop her. Days passed, or perhaps it was only hours. Time had lost all meaning in this strange, mirrored world. The other Holly began to change, her features becoming more grotesque, more monstrous with each passing day. Her eyes grew larger, the blackness spreading until it consumed her entire face. Her smile became a gaping maw, filled with sharp, jagged teeth. She was no longer human, she was something else, something dark and ancient that had taken Holly's place. Holly could do nothing but watch as the other Holly lived her life, interacting with people on the island, pretending to be her. The creature was cunning, mimicking Holly's mannerisms perfectly, but there was always that undercurrent of malice, that hint of something sinister lurking beneath the surface. One day, as the other Holly was walking along the cliffs, she encountered an old woman, a local who had known the twins since they were children. The old woman stopped, peering closely at the creature, her eyes narrowing in suspicion. "You're not Holly," the old woman said. The other Holly smiled, revealing those sharp, inhuman teeth. "No," she replied. "But she's with me, always." With a sudden, vicious movement, the creature lunged at the old woman. Holly screamed, but no sound came out. She watched in horror as the other Holly pushed the old woman over the edge, her body disappearing into the churning sea below. The other Holly laughed, a cruel, mocking sound that echoed in Holly's mind. Soon, the creature whispered, turning to look directly at Holly through the mirror, "I'll do that to everyone you love." Holly's silent scream reverberated in the void. The mirror had imprisoned her in this twisted, reflective world, leaving her powerless to stop the horror that was unfolding. She watched helplessly as the creature, her doppelganger, continued to live her life, sowing chaos and terror in its wake. The days blurred together, each one a nightmare from which Holly could not wake. The other Holly grew bolder, more malevolent. She reveled in the fear she instilled in the people of the Isle of Wight. The local villagers, once close-knit and friendly, began to avoid her, whispering behind closed doors about the strange and terrible things that had started happening since Holly's return. Children went missing. Animals were found mutilated. The once peaceful island was gripped by a growing sense of dread. And all the while, Holly remained trapped in the mirror, forced to watch her life being torn apart by the monster that had taken her place. One night, as the creature sat by the fireplace in the old family home, Holly noticed something strange in the reflection. The flames cast flickering shadows across the room, and in the mirror, those shadows seemed to move with a life of their own. They writhed and twisted, reaching out toward Holly as if beckoning her closer. Desperate for any hope, Holly moved toward the shadows, feeling their cold, spectral touch. The shadows seemed to recognize her, swelling around her in a dark embrace. For the first time since she had been trapped, Holly felt a faint glimmer of hope. Perhaps the shadows, these remnants of some ancient power, could help her escape. The shadows whispered to her, their voices like the rustling of dry leaves. They spoke of the mirror's dark origins, of the malevolent force that had created it, a force that thrived on the suffering of those it ensnared. The mirror was a doorway, they told her, a gateway to a realm of darkness and despair. But it was also a prison, and like all prisons, it had a weakness. Holly listened intently, clinging to their every word. The shadows revealed that the mirror's power was tied to the creature that now inhabited her life. If she could weaken the creature, if she could disrupt its hold on her world, then the mirror's grip on her might also weaken. But to do so, Holly would need to confront the creature directly, to face the darkness within herself and reclaim what had been stolen from her. The shadows warned her that this would not be easy. The creature was strong, and its connection to the mirror gave it a terrifying power. But Holly had something the creature did not: her love for her sister, her memories of their shared life, and the strength that came from those bonds. The creature could mimic her appearance, her voice, even her mannerisms, but it could never truly understand the depth of her love for Emily. With the shadow's guidance, Holly began to plan. She watched the creature closely, learning its habits, its weaknesses. She could see the moments when it faltered, when it hesitated, unsure of how to act in a situation that required genuine human emotion. These were the moments Holly would need to exploit. The creature had grown arrogant, confident in its ability to control Holly's life. It had no idea that Holly was still watching, still fighting from within the mirror. And so Holly waited, biding her time, until the perfect moment arrived. That moment came on a stormy night, when the wind howled outside and the sea crashed violently against the cliffs. The other Holly sat in the living room, staring into the fire, lost in thought. The house was dark, the only light coming from the flickering flames. Holly could feel the shadows gathering around her, their whispers growing louder, urging her on. "Now," they said. "Now is the time." Holly focused all her will, pushing against the mirror's barrier with every ounce of strength she had. The shadows swirled round her, lending their power to hers, and slowly, painfully, Holly felt the mirror's grip begin to weaken. In the living room, the creature suddenly stiffened, sensing something was wrong. It turned toward the mirror, its black eyes narrowing in suspicion. But before it could react, Holly struck. She pushed with all her might, and the mirror shattered, the glass exploding outward in a shower of glittering shards. The creature screamed, a high-pitched, inhuman wail, as the connection between it and the mirror was severed. Holly felt herself being pulled forward, out of the darkness and into the light. She stumbled into the living room, gasping for breath, her body weak and trembling. The creature was writhing on the floor, its form shifting and distorting as it tried to regain control. But without the mirror's power, it was vulnerable, and Holly could see its true form: a twisted, nightmarish entity of shadow and malice. With a surge of adrenaline, Holly grabbed a shard of the shattered mirror and plunged it into the creature's heart. The creature shrieked, its body convulsing as the shard pierced its dark essence. The shadows around it began to dissipate, dissolving into nothingness as the creature's form crumbled into ash. Holly fell to her knees, exhausted, as the last remnants of the creature vanished. The house was silent, the oppressive darkness lifting, replaced by a calm, peaceful stillness. The fire crackled softly in the hearth, the only sound in the quiet room. Holly took a deep breath, tears streaming down her face. She had done it. She had defeated the creature, broken the mirror's curse, and reclaimed her life. But the victory was bittersweet. She knew that she could never forget the horrors she had witnessed, the darkness she had faced. As she sat there, staring into the dying flames, Holly felt a presence beside her. She turned, and for a brief moment she saw Emily standing there, her face gentle and kind, just as Holly remembered her. Emily smiled, a smile full of love and understanding, and then she was gone, her spirit finally at peace. Holly smiled through her tears, knowing that Emily was still with her, that their bond could never be broken, not even by death. She stood up, feeling the warmth of the fire on her skin, and made her way to the front door. The storm had passed, and the sky was clear, the stars shining brightly above the Isle of Wight. Holly stepped outside, breathing in the fresh, salty air. The wind whispered softly in her ear, carrying with it the promise of a new beginning. She knew that the road ahead would not be easy, that the memories of the mirror and the creature would haunt her for a long time. But Holly also knew that she was strong, that she had faced the darkness and emerged victorious. And as she walked away from the old family home, leaving the shattered mirror and the horrors of the past behind her, Holly knew that she would be okay. She would carry Emily's memory with her, a light to guide her through whatever darkness lay ahead. For she had looked into the mirror's twin, faced the shadow of her soul, and had come out on the other side whole and finally free. Thank you for listening. I hope you enjoyed this story. Please don't forget to like, and even better, like and subscribe. Thank you very much, and I hope you have had or have a great day.